So for tonight's talk, for my part on metta, or how to cultivate friendliness and kindness, I will divide my talk into two parts. The first part will cover metta as taught by the Buddha. And the second part will cover how to cultivate friendliness and kindness. And this will be based on research and studies done scientifically, their findings, their recommendations. So the second part will be science-based or evidence-based practices. Now, metta is one of the four Brahma Viharas, or the four immeasurables. They are called immeasurables because they are limitless, boundless, and all-embracing. They are also infinite, right? And it says in the suttas that cultivators of the four Brahma Viharas can be expected to be reborn in the Brahma Loka, or the Brahma world. Now, you might be asking, is that possible for us lay people who are practicing metta to be reborn in the Brahma world? Well, actually, when the Buddha says that those who cultivate metta can be reborn in the Brahma world, he was referring to a very specific type of cultivation of metta. And this instruction on how to cultivate metta can be found in Theravada Sutta, found in Digha Nikaya Sutta number 13. In this sutta, the Buddha taught two very young Brahmin men, Bharadvaja and Vaseta, the path to union with Brahma. So what he says is that in order for you to practice metta, to be able to be reborn in the Brahma world, you have to practice sila, and then practice meditation, and then attain the first jhana. And after attaining the first jhana, then you suffuse your body and mind completely with metta, loving kindness. And from there, you radiate metta to all beings in all directions, all the four corners, up and down, and so forth. Okay, this form of metta, this quality of metta, when mastered completely, these cultivators can be expected to be reborn in the Brahma world. This kind of metta is very different from the metta that we lay people practice most commonly, where we just sit down quietly in a quiet room and then relax our mind, have some loving kindness thought, and then wish ourselves well and wish other people well. Now, this kind of mettas are very different in qualities compared to the one taught by the Buddha. Now, of course, the Buddha's metta practice is shared with his monks and his disciples, and these are serious meditators. On the other hand, would that mean that would we say that therefore our own layman version of metta is of no use? No, not exactly. That's not what I was trying to point out. In fact, even our regular practice of metta in that sense is a good practice because it habituates our mind to be in a certain state, to be in a very specific mental state, mental quality, a very particular mindset, which is conducive for loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So let's take a look at metta. What does it mean when we say metta? The Pali word metta is actually very difficult to be defined or translated into English. there have been many words used to translate metta, such as unconditional love, loving kindness, friendliness and kindness, unconditional acceptance, benevolence, amicable, things like that. What you can feel is that, the quality of metta is such that it is actually very soft, very calm, very gentle, all-embracing, unconditional. And the analogy of this kind of feeling is the mother's love for her only child, which is selfless, unconditional. All right. And we have, I think most of us as Buddhists have heard of the story of Nalagiri, the elephant, the drunken elephant that was sent by Devadatta to kill the Buddha. And how the Buddha, using the power of metta, subdued Nalagiri, the elephant. So this kind of power of metta is at its highest level. Only then can you subdue a raging elephant like Nalagiri. Of course, our own layman practice is nowhere near this quality of metta. However, as I have said earlier, that doesn't mean that we therefore should not practice our kind of metta, because what we can get from practicing our kind of metta, our layman kind of metta, is that we can gradually habituate or train our mind to be in a very special state of peace, calmness, love, unconditional acceptance, things like that, right? Now, the main suttas that you can find in the Nikayas on metta, there are two main suttas. The first one is Karaniya Metta Sutta, which is found in the Khuddaka Nikaya. There are two identical suttas, one found in Khuddaka Pata, and the other one is found in Sutta Nipata. Both are in the Khuddaka Nikaya. And this Karaniya Metta Sutta has very interesting stories behind it. And this Karaniya Metta Sutta was shared to the monks by the Buddha when a group of monks during a rainy retreat, Vasa, went to a forest to do their meditation. While they were doing their meditations, the tree spirit disturbed them. It was so disturbing for them that they could not practice their meditation well. So therefore, they reported these incidents to the Buddha, whereby the Buddha taught them the Karaniya Mettas. So this is the sutta that we chant, Karaniya Metta Sutta. And after that, the monks practiced the Karaniya Metta Sutta, and not only were they able to subdue the three spirits, but in fact, the three spirits received so much metta that they were very supportive of the monks being in their forest. Okay. In the first four, the Karaniya Metta Suttas have 10 stanzas. The first four describe the qualities that a person should have for him to be able to practice metta properly, such as a proper sila, guarded in senses, gentle, approachable, not arrogance, things like that, all right? And then the subsequent stanzas, stanza 5 to 10, describe how to practice metta. So if you're really interested, you can refer to this sutta to practice. The other sutta which I have mentioned that describe how to practice metta is the Te Vijja Sutta, found in Nikaya, Digha Nikaya, number 13. Okay. Now the second sutta is the Metta Nisamsa Sutta. This is found in Anguttara Nikaya. In this sutta, in this second sutta, the sutta lists 11 benefits of practicing metta. Okay, and I think we can go and have a look at what these benefits are. Number one, you sleep well. those who practice metta sleeps well, sleeps easily, falls asleep without problem. Number 2, you wake up happy. Number 3, you had no bad dreams. Number 4, you are loved by humans. Number 5, you are even loved by non-humans. Number 6, you are protected by the devas. Number 7, one cannot be harmed by fire, poison, or blade. I think for that to happen, your quality of metta has to be very, very high. No? Number 8, the mind concentrates easily. When the mind is peaceful, when the mind is relaxed, it concentrates easily. Number 9, your face is clear and bright. Number 10, when you die peacefully. And lastly, number 11, when you die, you can be reborn in the Brahma Loka, the Brahma world. Okay. Now, I have mentioned earlier that the mind of metta is very specific, very special. It's not the normal quality of mind that we have that we use on a day-to-day basis. It is unconditional acceptance of what is. Okay, unconditional acceptance of what is. For that to happen, that means you accept it without even any degree of resistance within you. This is at the highest level of our practice, of course. If you are new to it, there will be some resistance, and that's how we need to work through those resistance. You have unsullied or untainted bias. The mind is unsullied or untainted by bias, beliefs or views, whether consciously or unconsciously. And it is attained through the knowing mind or the intuitive mind rather than the thinking mind, okay? So the kind of metta that you practice, that you have, the quality of it will be dependent on the purity of the mind that you have, okay? Now, I saw this slide, or I saw this picture shared in Facebook. So I thought it was very useful in the sense that this Lumpur talk about the fact that everything beyond just knowing is extraneous. It's frivolous. Anything beyond just knowing is frivolous. That means to say that when our mind is at peace, all the other thinkings that appear is just drama. It's just addition to our experience. It's all pure drama. So if you want to practice metta, you want to reduce this thinking mind, gradually reduce the thinking mind. And to do that, you will need to have a certain degree of mindfulness practice and meditative practice. Because the thinking mind is constantly filled with dramas and fabrications. And this is conditioned into our mind. It is out of habits. So it is loaded with all kinds of bias, of beliefs and views. And this kind of thinking mind leads to stress and fear. And therefore, we are constantly anxious, full of anger, violence, and totally uncomfortable with ourselves. I've mentioned before that our mind is habitual. Whether we are consciously or unconsciously, we are consciously aware of it, or we are unconscious about our habits, the fact of the matter is that our mind has a lot of habitual patterns, and it is incumbent upon us to be mindful enough to be able to see these habitual patterns and choose whatever habitual patterns that are no longer serving us and replace them with habitual patterns that are beneficial to us through our practice. And one of these habitual patterns that we want to cultivate as a Buddhist is metta, is a mind of unconditional acceptance. Okay. So, as I said, metta as taught by the Buddha is very different from the metta that we practice. So, there is a spiritual practice versus a worldly practice. I would think that as a Buddhist practitioner, our goal will be to gradually evolve so that we can practice the kind of metta that the Buddha taught us. A high degree of attainment of loving kindness, unconditional acceptance, and all embracing. Okay, but we have to start from where we are, and our practice should be gradual and continuous. We can start small and gradually expand on our practice. We cultivate new habits with clear intentions, meaning we are consciously aware of our practice. And then we supplement this practice with meditation and mindfulness. This is important because mindfulness practice sharpens our awareness and provides us with greater insights into our practice. Okay, so this is all I'm going to cover for metta as taught by the Buddha. Because the second part, I would want to spend a little bit more time to elaborate, since those are probably more practical for those of us lay Buddhists who have not decided to renounce yet. So let's take a look at the definition of friendliness. Friendliness is said to be affable, amicable, cordial, with good nature and warmth, right? And why do we want to cultivate friendliness? Now, in the Yoga Sutra that is written by a yogi called Patanjali, I would like to point out that this is not a Buddhist sutra. It is a sutra found in the Hindu Vedas. But even in their practice, they said that the cultivation of the 4 Brahma Vihara keep the mind favorably disposed, serene and benevolent. Therefore, it keeps the mind in a state of well-being. And practicing or cultivating friendliness helps us to overcome animosity or fear towards other people. Because by reducing our animosity and our fear, we reduce our hostile thoughts and reduce our resistance to friendliness. Okay. But this is not a Buddhist sutta. Okay. What about kindness? The definition of kindness is also quite broad. It's a quality of being friendly, generous, considerate. In fact, it includes the quality of benevolence, being approachable, not selfish or selfless, you know. These are the qualities found in kindness. Now, the practice or the cultivation of kindness gives us a positive feedback loop or a virtuous cycle. What do we mean by that? The scientists who did studies on kindness have found that people who practice kindness, who perform acts of kindness, are happier. And when they are happier, they become more willing to do more acts of kindness. So it is a positive feedback loop. Kindness makes us happy. Happiness makes us kind. And kindness makes us happy. Happiness makes us kind. So it's a virtuous cycle, a positive cycle. So this is why it's called a positive feedback loop. So when we start to practice kindness, we start small. And as we do it more and more, we become happy with ourselves. And therefore, we are more likely to continue our act of kindness. Secondly, kind acts are also contagious. That means they have a ripple effect. What do I mean by that? When you do an act of kindness towards another person, that person now receiving the kindness effect that you have performed for him or her feels happy, has greater trust in humanity, and in turn becomes more likely to perform an act of kindness to somebody else. And scientific studies have shown that this contagious ripple effect can go 3 generations or 3 cycles. That means if I perform an act of kindness towards you, there's a good chance that you in turn will perform an act of kindness to someone else. And that someone else will perform an act of kindness to another person. So that is what you call first generation, second generation, third generations of recipients of kindness. Therefore, kindness is not only good for ourselves, it is good for the recipients, and it is very, very good for the community and society as a whole. So kindness is considered a virtue in that sense because it is good for the practitioner, it is good for the recipient, and it is good for society as a whole, right? And scientists have said that kindness, friendliness, and all these virtues, they are like a muscle. In other words, it is a skill that you can practice. If you are no good at performing kind acts now, you start off by doing small acts of kindness, and bit by bit, when you do more and more, it becomes easier to perform act of kindness in the future. So like a muscles that you train daily, it gradually becomes stronger. So we can strengthen our act of kindness by repeating daily act of kindness. Okay. Scientific studies have also linked kindness and generosity to some really good benefits of the practitioner. Number one is a greater life satisfaction. What this means is that people who act kindly and are generous generally feel happy with themselves and feel happy with their life and feel as if their life has a purpose, has a meaning. So they are more fulfilled in that sense, right? And therefore they become more contented with the life that they have. Right? Then secondly, kindness and generosity is linked to stronger and better relationships. Now, if you, 2 scientists, they are related, the husband and wife team, John and Julie Gottman from the Gottman Institute, studied kindness and generosities for more than 30 years. And they list down all the various traits and qualities that is important in a relationship that can keep a relationship strong and healthy. And they found that when you cut down all the traits and choose only the most essential traits for a good relationship, kindness and generosity stands out, right? So if you have kindness and generosity in a relationship, then the relationship can grow stronger and lasting and more lasting and more loving. And this is in opposition to if that relationship has traits like hostility and contempt. Contempt and hostility are the opposite of kindness and generosity. They break the relationship. If you have contempt and hostility in your relationship, you can be very sure that sooner or later it will break up, right? On the other hand, if you practice kindness and generosity, in your relationship. And when I say relationship, we are not only talking about interpersonal relationship. This also applies to intrapersonal relationship, meaning your relationship with yourself. When you are kind towards yourself, you tend to love yourself more, be more comfortable in your own skin, and be more contented, and have a stronger self-confidence, self-worth. And because you have a greater self-confidence and self-worth, you have greater trust in the future of your life, in the outcome of your life. And this is called, this in turn will further make you more susceptible to more acts of kindness. So this is again a positive feedback, right? So intrapersonally, you have to be kind to yourself. Interpersonally, kindness and generosity strengthen relationships in a marriage, between parents and children, between siblings. It also strengthens relationships at workplace, even strengthen or create new relationships with strangers. Okay, so kindness and generosity is very, very useful in that sense. In addition, kindness and generosity improve your mental and physical health, both mental and physical, not just mental, but also physical health. In fact, if you, a lady scientist by the name of Candace Pert wrote a book called Molecules of Emotions. And in that book, she described how positive emotions like kindness and generosity can trigger a cascade of bio and physiological reactions in the body that eventually lead to a boost in our immune system. And this boost in our immune system can help us to live longer, live healthier, even improve our blood pressure, reduce our blood pressure, and strengthen our heart. Okay, so there are a lot of benefits that you can derive from when you practice kindness and generosity. So now we are going to take a look at 3 research-based ways to cultivate kindness. And I get this from the Greater Good Science Center, their website. First is how to cultivate feelings of kindness. Second, how to boost the happiness we get from kindness so that it increases. And the third one is how to inspire kindness in others. Okay, we'll look at the first one, how to cultivate feelings of kindness. Now, there are 3 ways to cultivate feelings of kindness. The first one is the feeling of connectedness. The second one is feeling supported. And the third one is compassion or metta meditation. Okay. What do we mean when we say feeling connected? The scientists have shown that the more we feel connected to others, the kinder we will feel towards them, and the more likely we are to perform acts of kindness towards them. Okay. This apparently satisfies one of our basic needs, to belong in a community, in a group, in a tribe. Okay. And how can we improve or increase our feeling of connectedness? Actually, there are many ways that you can use to increase your feeling of connectedness. In fact, this feeling of connectedness need not apply only to connectedness towards another human being, right? In fact, the feeling of connectedness can also be directed towards nature, life as a whole, life in general. Okay, In other words, when we feel ourselves connected to nature, connected to life, we will also feel kinder towards ourselves and towards others, and therefore more likely to perform acts of kindness. Okay, that's why in one of the studies, they recommended one way to feel connected with nature is to go for what they call an all walk. And what this means is that you take a walk in nature. You go to the forest, or you go to the beach, or you go for a trek, or you go by a lake, and you feel yourself connected to nature. When you feel yourself connected to nature, you feel that you are just a small part of the universe. And in that smallness, actually, in that smallness, you feel the awe towards nature, towards life. And because of that awe, our sense of selfishness, self-centeredness is diminished. When our self-centeredness and selfishness is diminished, then what happens, or what is in its place, is this selflessness towards others, towards ourselves as well as towards others. So this sense of connectedness helps to make it easier to be connected to nature, and therefore make it more likely for us to perform acts of kindness. Another way for us to feel connected to other human beings, to other people, is to think in terms of groups. So in terms of families, in terms of siblings, in terms of work colleagues, these are groups, okay? In terms also, you know, in terms of communities, in terms of nationalities, in an inclusive or embracing way, not in a divisive way. If we put ourselves in a group and we see ourselves as being different from others in a divisive way, then this is not going to help with kindness. But if we see ourselves in a group, inclusive, embracing, benevolent, then we will feel more likely to perform acts of kindness, right? Now, the second one, feeling supported. Have you ever looked back at yourself and your life and reflect on the time when you were down or out and you needed someone to talk to, and there was a friend there, or a relative there, or someone who could trust you, whom you could trust, being there for you, a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on, someone who supported you in your downtime. When you feel supported and when you feel safe, even though you're vulnerable, this feeling can perpetuate feeling of kindness towards others who may be going through the same challenges, right? So feeling supported is, if you have felt supported before, you can now provide this kind of support towards others who need it, right? Now, in my work as a doctor, as a family doctor, I've counseled people in depression. I've treated patients with depression, and I see many of these patients actually come back even after they have recovered from their depression. They come back to meet up, have lunch, just to chat, you know, just to stay connected. Why? Because during their downtime, during the time when they needed support, somebody was there to listen to them, to support them. So now they themselves feel kind towards the one who has helped them. And also now they can extend that sense of kindness towards other living beings, other people, okay? So if you can generate this feeling of being supportive towards yourself, being supportive towards others, you are more likely to be kind towards others as well. And the third way to cultivate feelings of kindness is either practicing compassionate meditation or metta meditation. Okay, I won't go into too much details on that. Huh? Now, how do we boost happiness that we get from our kind acts? There are three ways again. The first one is when we practice kindness, do it with intention, with conscious awareness. When we do it with conscious awareness, with the clear intention, our reward that we feel from our kind act is amplified, is multiplied. Okay. The other way is to do random acts of kindness. That means sudden act of kindness that you do spur of the moment. There was one time in the early days when toll gate collects only coins. There were no touch and go and tax, things like that, where you only pay with coins. There was once when after I reached the toll gate, I paid for my toll gate, and at the same time, I paid for the car behind me out of the spur of the moment. Now, I don't know the driver behind me. I have not met the person. I don't even know who that person is. But that random act of kindness towards this person, this total stranger, may hopefully triggers the feeling, the same kind of act, kind act that he might do towards others, you know, pay forward towards others. So this kind of random acts of kindness can be very contagious as well, right? And there are many, many ways to do these random acts of kindness. There are even many websites that give you suggestions on what are the various random acts of kindness you can perform. Okay, so if you are really interested to try this, you can search the keyword random acts of kindness, and they will give you all kinds of suggestions. Okay. Now the third one, to help us to boost happiness that we get from kindness, is to make givings feel good. And how do we do that? We do that by when we ask people to be generous, for example, or when we want to be generous, or when we want to ask people to be generous. Don't compel them to do it. Give them a choice. When you are given the freedom of choice, you are more likely to say yes, rather than when you're compelling them to do so. In addition, a person who is compelled to act generously don't have that gentle, kind mindset, you know, that state of mind. So that quality of giving is diminished. On the other hand, if you give them a choice, they willingly act out in kindness, that is a totally different kind of kindness. The quality is very much greater, right? Another way to make givings feel good is to make a connection. That is to say that, for example, in your office with your colleague, sometimes you may want to give your colleague a treat. Okay. One way to give your colleague a treat is, of course, to just buy him or her lunch, order, send it to the office and pass it to that person. But to make a greater connection, you can actually invite that person to go out for a lunch with you, so that you can have a conversation, get to know that person deeper, better, so that you have that personal connection with that person. Okay, so making a connection can boost the happiness that we get from our kind act. And thirdly, learn the impact of the kind act. So when you buy when you want to do an act of kindness, say a donation towards a charitable organization, okay, don't just give in terms of money or in kinds, but also follow up to see what this donation has done, has impacted the recipients. Okay, so follow up on the impact of your kind act in that way can encourage other people to be kinder as well. And having seen the impact of the kind act, the positive impact of the kind act, we also get a boost to our own happiness. Okay, and when we are happier, we are more likely to perform more acts of kindness. So the third way, scientific-based way to practice kindness or cultivate kindness is to inspire kindness in others. Okay, and again, one of the ways to inspire kindness in others is to remind others of our connectedness to each other. Right? I won't elaborate on this anymore because we have mentioned quite a lot already about connectedness. The second way is to put a human face on suffering, and this way, the newscaster, the TV presenters are very good. For example, when they report on famine in a country, they will not just report generally, but they will interview one or two of those people suffering in that famine. So that put a human face on the suffering, and that is likely to inspire us to act of kindness, right? Okay. Shared identity, a sense of tribe or group or family or connections again, all right? And one way that we should do to inspire kindness in others is to encourage our own children, our own kids in doing or performing acts of kindness. And the way to do this we don't really have to force our kids to act. We ourselves, in being kind to ourselves, to our spouse, to our children, to our siblings, will encourage them to be kind to others as well. Because our children learn by observing our behavior. Okay. Now, in another article, a different article that I read, they recommended 4 ways to cultivate kindness. Okay, and the 4 ways are random acts of kindness, loving kindness meditation, self-compassionate letter, and change your self-talk. Now, I have mentioned acts of kindness and loving kindness meditation. So I'm just going to cover a little bit on self-compassionate letter and change your self-talk. These last 2 methods are actually not directed outward, but directed inward. We are looking at ourselves inside our own mind, right? So self-compassionate letter. So you can sometimes just sit down and write yourself a letter. And in that letter, you describe your negative feelings towards yourself, why you're feeling negative. And then with a mind of compassion and understanding, or if you find that being compassionate towards yourself is difficult, you can imagine you're talking to a loved one, or you can talk to yourself in a compassionate way, right? During this time, it is useful to remember that we are all imperfect beings, full of flaws, and therefore we should be more forgiving towards ourselves and our own mistakes. And we can end by suggesting or giving ourselves suggestions on how we can cope or improve ourselves. Okay. The studies scientific studies on people writing self-compassionate letters to themselves they have found that people who practice this, they tend to end up being more forgiving and more accepting of their own flaws. And therefore, they become more comfortable in their own skin. And that will increase their self-confidence and their self-worth. And with the increase in self-confidence and self-worth, they are more trusting towards life, towards others, and therefore they tend to become more hopeful. And people who are more hopeful also tend to be kinder towards themselves as well as towards others. Okay, so this practice of writing a self-compassionate letter from time to time is one way to cultivate our kindness. And another way to cultivate kindness is to change our inner self-talk. This was developed and described by Professor Christine from University of Texas, Austin. And she stated that you can do this in 3 steps. First, you notice when you are being self-critical, right? This requires a high degree of mindfulness, so that you can notice when you are being critical of yourself. Because we have inner self-talk all the time. And if you notice, many of these self-talks are very negative. And so when you are able to notice this critical self-talk, pause for a moment, and then try to talk to this critic in you in a compassionate and non-judgmental way. Be kind, and try to reframe the critic's observations in a kinder way. See it from a different perspective, from a kinder perspective, from a more forgiving perspective, and from a perspective that is more beneficial and wholesome to you. So in this way, you can increase this way also helps you to accept yourself better, have better self-acceptance means you have self-worth, self-confidence, and again, the same thing. You end up being gentler to yourself as well as gentler towards others, and therefore more likely to act kindly. All right. So these are some of the ways that you can use to cultivate friendliness and kindness towards yourself as well as towards others.